Director Beckett just asked for an invite to this meeting, so he will be participating by Zoom. Janice, are you able to send it to him?
I can try, or I can get George to. I'll try right now.
Are we live streaming yet, Wendy?
Not yet, not till we start call it to order.
I just sent it, Wendy. But yes, it's live streaming now, Mike.
So, hello everybody. Our first meeting back in the regional office here, our boardroom. Like to welcome us to the Electoral Area Directors Committee meeting and recognize that we're conducting our business on the traditional territories of the Hupuchesset and Sept First Nations. Welcome anybody who's listening to us on live streaming. We are live streaming, so I just want to point that out. I see that Bob's not here, and call this meeting to order, and we have an agenda before us. Can we have approval of the agenda?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Thank you. Adoption of the minutes. Electoral Area Director Committee meeting held June 24th, 2020.
Adoption.
Okay. You're going to have to use your speakers because
I'll second.
Yes, Madam Chairperson, if the director could say, or someone could say their name as well. I'm having trouble understanding who or hearing who's moving seconding motions. Thank you.
Director for Beaver Creek.
Seconded by Director Shannon.
Okay, all in favor? Thank you. Carried. We have reports, memorandum, planning and development department update. So we'll direct this to Mr. Erg. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. There's 10 sections to this report. So what I thought I would do is just I'll give a summary of each section and then just ask for questions if that works for everybody. There was at the last board meeting, or the board meeting in August, the board had asked for an update to the EA directors on several of the items, and some of the others we had the information available and just thought it was pertinent to this committee, so we provided some additional information as well. So the first part, it just relates to planning applications that we've received in 2020. So in March, when COVID started and the declaration was declared, we really didn't know where we were going to be at. In a lot of ways, planned for a real reduction in applications, and that has not happened. And in lots of ways, we've seen the opposite. So we have to date 58 development applications. So this does not include bylaw enforcement. So just wanted to provide that that update, and just a note, as always, this takes up a significant amount of staff time as well. So I think we have figured out and done several APC meetings and other committee meetings involved with the development, the planning department through Zoom, and that seems to be working well. And we will continue on. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Okay, so I'll just go on to the next section, which is the cannabis production. And I meant to put at the beginning. So while the report is signed off by me, this had contribution from everybody in the planning department, and Alex Steyer and Amy Anaka both had significant input into and drafted quite a few of the sections of this report. So I just as we all recall, I'm sure, Bylaw P 1399, which amended the regulations around cannabis production, was adopted in March 2020. We have incorporated those changes into the new draft zoning bylaw that's being prepared, and I think the board had an update at the last meeting, and I will touch on it briefly later on in the report, the zoning bylaw overall. And really, I will note that we continue to get calls related to cannabis growing in areas for things that we can't regulate. Right. So you know, and inquiries about some projects that were underway before that fall under legal non-conforming. So those continue. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have of this for this portion. Okay.
I have
Oh,
questions.
absolutely.
The cannabis, we have inquiries. So is it for the growing or is it for the retail? I'm interested in the growing
Oh,
part.
sorry, the growing. I'm just talking about the growing production part right
yes.
now. So yes, we still have had complaints regarding what we assume would fall under designated and personal production licenses. We always refer those. You know, we can refer to the RCP if there's questions around something potentially being illegal. There is also a complaint process that we can share with people through Health Canada. So we do that, and just inquiries in general around what the regulations are, what we can regulate, what we can't regulate. You know, what our bylaws currently say, and specifically around some of the agricultural the ALR regulations that allow cannabis production in certain circumstances.
Okay, the last year about this time, there was a presentation, I believe, at UBCM regarding the provincial or federal special task force that was going to be doing investigating. So have we heard anything from any more on that, on how they're proceeding? I know that this would be probably in camera if there wasn't any
So I don't have
case,
any,
but I just
in general.
Yeah, in general.
In general, have not heard an update on that. I know the federal government had talked, if this relates to personal and designated production.
Yes.
The federal government had talked about a review in 5 years, but we haven't had any updates on where that's at.
So we're a few years into that now. So I'm hoping that they'll start looking at that, because this is where all our complaints are coming from. So mostly. So, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we certainly will keep the board up to date on any new information we get. Okay, regarding cannabis retail, we did incorporate the new fee structure into the development procedures bylaw. So it's $1,000 to apply and $600 to hold the public meeting. There was some direction to update the policy. That is something that staff has not done to date, updated the policy around where retail could or couldn't go. Certainly, we have seen in the regional district as a whole, cannabis retail applications, with the majority being within the city of Port Alberni. So we have processed 2 applications. The board may recall, one which was approved and one which was not approved. So within the regional district, there is 1 licensed cannabis retail store on the entrance in Cherry Creek. And there's really an opportunity to talk about discussions, if sort of where this falls in. There's the option to deal with an application when it comes in as well. So certainly happy to answer questions or talk about sort of what direction, if the board would like to go with anything on this.
Director Roberts?
Yeah, through the chair to Mr. Erg. What's the status of the 1 medical grow up that the application was presented, and have they picked up their application yet?
You mean the one with the building permit?
With the which?
For the one, I'm not sure which one it was.
The large medical grow up.
Oh, Beaver Creek.
Beaver Creek.
Yeah. So the building permit has not been issued to date.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there
Again,
any?
that's public information, so it's
Right.
good, it's okay to share. it publicly.
Okay. Director McNabb?
So on the retail side, the city of Port Alberni has much different guidelines from the regional district. I mean, Bradford Street, there's 4 of them within a 2-block area. And I'm wondering what happens, or if there's any linkage between the city and the regional district as far as retail outlets that are bordering the regional district. So, we've got we're a 1 kilometer distance between them. And is that 1 kilometer from the one that's in the city, or 1 kilometer from the border, or what?
So this is certainly within the board's policy, the way, so we haven't updated the policy, but we had discussed in the past about the 1 kilometer. It would be appropriate to be 1 kilometer. So if that's something, that the board still wishes to consider, that applies whether it's in the city or not. So if something was, say, a cannabis retail store was proposed on the border in the regional district, and there was another cannabis store within 1 kilometer of that in the city, you certainly can apply that policy. And I think it's somewhat confusing in that the liquor regulations for private liquor stores, that's a liquor cannabis regulation branch policy. So for liquor stores, there's a requirement for them to be 1 kilometer apart, and it may be 1 kilometer to 800 meters. I'm not sure exactly on it. That does not apply to cannabis retail stores, but the board can apply that and can certainly apply it to something that's in the city as well. Does that answer the question? And recognizing that it's the board's policy, so it's not a bylaw that requires a variance. It's a policy, and how the board and staff would provide advice to the board.
No,
on where
it
cannabis
doesn't
retail-
really answer my question. My question really is are the city of Port Alberni planning department and our planning department having a conversation with regards to cannabis operations that are near the borders of each? So so that that we're not ending up with a surprise situation where there's one that on the city border, and then there's one on the regional district border, and nobody's talked about it.
We certainly would, I would, if we had an application, within 1 kilometer of the city boundary, we'd be discussing that with the city to clarify if there was any cannabis retail stores there.
But there's no requirements to put out some kind of a
So
memorandum or
we have,
something.
there isn't a legal requirement to do a referral.
Referral,
A
that's
practice we do, and the city often, especially if it involves rezoning and development applications. Cannabis retail is a little bit different. We have not received a cannabis retail referral from the city, and vice versa. We haven't referred anything to the city. The ones we've considered have been more than 1 kilometer away, but just.
Could we possibly ask the city if they would accommodate us, I guess?
Oh,
and-
absolutely. Yeah, for
Okay.
sure. Yeah, we can certainly, and I think there's an opportunity for just to recommend the board can, or the committee can just pass a resolution just requesting staff reach out to the city and just ask that we be referred on cannabis retail
Okay,
applications. We could do that.
okay. I have Director Shannon and Director Roberts.
Thank you. Through the chair. I understood that there's a 300-meter separation between stores, not 1 kilometer. It's 1 kilometer from sensitive areas. So just so we watch that, because it's in the report here that it's the 300 meters, not 1 kilometer. And then I just had a question about, because there was a recommendation for an application fee to be implemented. Do we have that application fee for any other businesses that want to potentially start within the regional district? Or is that special to like cannabis and liquor stores?
So this is
Just a little
special
background.
to cannabis because of the requirements to do consultation and so with a cannabis retail application, we have to notify, get public input. That's part of the requirement. If somebody was say to put in a gas station and it's already zoned for a gas station, they just apply for a building permit and potentially a development permit if it's in that area. There isn't the same requirement. So that's why. So to answer your question, most businesses know there isn't an application other than the building permit and development permit. But there isn't also the requirement for the local government input and consultation that there is with a cannabis retail store.
Sure.
So, so just for clarification, so that's from like federal government, that provincial, okay, that we need to do that process. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Roberts?
My question was just asked and answered. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to welcome Director Beckett. Do you have any questions?
No, thank you very much.
Great. Okay, is there anything else on this? Okay, thank you.
Okay. And then the next area is the zoning bylaw update. So so the new draft zoning bylaw is currently out for a pre-referral. So this is something we do with large projects like official community plans, or in this case, it's the first time we've ever rewritten the zoning bylaw. What we will do is sort of before first reading, once we've done our public consultation, had input, before we present anything to first reading, is we send it out what we just refer to as a pre-referral to the agency. So in this case, we've sent it out to 25 provincial and federal agencies and other like Waterworks District, Church Water, the fire departments, as well as the 10 First Nations to get feedback. And then the idea would be that if there's any requirements, because there's certain requirements that we have to follow for provincial agencies, or good suggestions that come back, we can incorporate that into the zoning bylaw before we present it for first reading. So that's it's a good practice, and actually is a much cleaner process. So when we do the official referral, all of the agencies and First Nations have already seen the bylaw. We can let them know what we have or have not incorporated and why into their, of their suggestions and changes that we make. We're also getting a legal review right now as well, because we want to make sure we're not doing things that are contrary to the act or case law. Again, that's just something that is always good practice. And in addition, Bamfield, we worked with Director Beckett and to put together some additional information to get out to the Bamfield community. So as you recall, we incorporated some specific changes or draft zones that would apply to Bamfield specifically, and are recognizing that they function as a small service center as opposed to the other electoral areas, are all in close proximity to municipalities that have some of those services that are more difficult to get in Bamfield. And we just wanted to recognize that. Some of it relates to commercial zones and others around to smaller lot sizes if the area in Bamfield is able to get both sewer and water, common sewer and water. So I just want to highlight that in May and August of 2019, the ACRD and planning staff with the area directors hosted 6 open houses in each of the electoral areas. We had a total of 194 participants, and we received 63 comment sheets that were filled out. And certainly there was some discussion at the last board meeting, I understand, just around how we would do a continued consultation. And if more is needed, I think that's be a good time to talk about that, sort of recognizing the timing. I think we've while this has been a long process, and COVID and everything that happened over the last 7 months has sort of been a challenge for some of this project. We've had a lot of public feedback and input. I think holding just an open house, sort of like we historically do, wouldn't. The information is on our website as well for the public to review. We are periodically getting questions still from the public on their interest and feedback on things like that. And, you know, we will, as we move forward and make changes based on the referral agencies, you know, we will do some advertising and highlight where this information is. And I think I'll stop at this point and really just, you know, hope for some discussion on where the directors, where you think we were at, and if there's something additional that staff aren't planning to do, to talk about that. And then, you know, the public hearing process is something that's, when we get closer to it, we're going to have to figure out how we manage that. You know, certainly if things are exactly the same as they are today, I would anticipate doing it through Zoom and using the new webinar system, which allows people to participate a little bit better than just talking sort of on the main screen. But also before that, I would want to, you know, we would provide a lot opportunity for input and questions prior to the public hearing, you know, just so that we can address sometimes we get questions at public hearings, and people are, you know, not sure how something would apply, as opposed to, you know, there's that input that people want to comment specifically on the way the bylaw is drafted and whether they support it or don't support it or have concerns. And so, you know, rightly, that should stay within the public hearing. And we would, but just sort of greater opportunity to have that discussion about how people can have input, you know, through in-person or in-person on Zoom and writing. So that's where we're at.
Okay, Director
Questions?
McNabb.
So my comment to that would be that what we've been doing on an ordinary times basis, to my thinking, has not been good enough. So when we didn't have COVID restrictions and so forth, we weren't getting the word out properly even then. And our attendance at open houses, our attendance at public hearings with regards to new bylaws has been very poor, except for in the case of when there's something that's attached to it, i.e. the when we had a Cherry Creek Hall, you know, which was really not about the public hearing at all. It was about an issue. So my suggestion would be for us to be looking at opportunities to engage the public and inform the public prior to whatever we would call a public meeting or a public hearing for such a thing as the zoning bylaw OCP plan updates, that we find a way to get them in an article in the newspaper, which then ends up online as well. The newspaper is delivered all over the Alberni Valley and to drop boxes at least. And most of the responses I've got over the last 6 months have come from a newspaper article that was written about what happened at the board meeting or whatever. And so we definitely have to think outside of the box. It's a different day, but it's compounded by the fact that what we were doing in the past wasn't good enough, even for that circumstance. So we need to really have a look at what, I mean, I'm not sure why we have to do that, but we should be able to do it ourselves. But we need to have a look at what other communities are doing to spur the public interest and work off of that. And we need to use all of the tools that are out there to use with regards to notification on these updates so that we actually get real and valuable public input. If we'd got that 4 years ago, it could have saved us a lot of grief along the line.
Director Bodnar.
Yes, this has been kind of one of my bones of contention. It seems that a lot of people put effort into planning these public meetings and a handful of people come. And unless an issue arrives, we're not really getting the people there before it happens. And I really support what Director McNabb has said.
Any other comments? Director Shannon?
Thank you. Well, I'll let Mr. Erg answer. He looked like he wanted to
Oh.
say something, and then I'll throw
No,
my
and,
two
and I
cents
mean,
in.
I appreciate and agree with what's being said. It is often a challenge to get people out and involved sort of in the broader planning context without a specific issue. You know, that is across, you know, sort of, you know, it's well out, you know, it's well beyond BC. It's something we talk about, you know, work on constantly. You know, we would anticipate in this providing additional information as opposed to just a public hearing notice in the ad. As we get more feedback and report back to the board, we'll certainly include sort of the additional public engagement process. And we'll work through that. I mean, the idea would be that we can address public concerns, comments, sort of before we get to the public hearing. That's the goal in this type of project. You know, we have had quite a bit of input and feedback sort of over the years. It's been a bit of time since the last one, and we certainly can reach out to them. And you know, again, that's the goal. But even the referrals that we're doing is we want to get, you know, the zoning bylaw as in the best shape we can before we present it for first reading. So, but we'll include the public engagement as part of the staff reports back. You know, beyond that, and I think the suggestion about reaching out to the local media, you know, we'll work with Alex and Amy on you know, possibly a, you know, an article in the newspaper and something on the radio.
We need something catchy. Director Beckett?
Thank you very much. While I concur with the consensus that there needs to be very, very thorough community engagement, I have to compliment staff on their efforts to assist me in Banfield. Mike and his staff have gone overboard in responding to my requests for special needs consideration. I know that you know, stuff has been forwarded to every social media venue that we can possibly think of. That every registered homeowner received a notice. And I you know, I can't help but, you know, use the analogy that you can lead a horse to water, you can't always get him to drink. It seems that some folks just are not paying attention to the work that the staff have done. You know, I don't know how to get around that, because this is very important to my community. It's important to the homeowners, especially the commercial and business individuals. And I just hope that they are reading it. I do have one individual that I've just emailed Mike about, who feels that, you know, staff perhaps could be a little bit more diligent in getting back to them. But overall, I just want to pass on my thanks. This is not easy times, and staff certainly have been very accommodating from my end. So thanks for that, Mike.
Okay, Director Shannon?
Thank you. So I agree with what's been said. I had a couple thoughts or suggestions of what we could possibly do. I mean, I'm bringing communications to our strategic priorities, but I would really love to see when we have a topic come up, like down the line, like burning coming up, the burning bylaw, this OCP and bylaw zoning, be more focused on the homepage of our website, even prior to maybe a week or two before it's starting, but really kind of build up to what's coming down the pipe, just to give people some more opportunity to see it, and try to be, I guess, a little bit more proactive with our advertising. And then in regards to newspaper articles, because from reading the online articles, because whenever I get to my mailbox, the newspapers are always gone. That like the media is asking for support too. So, and I know that with is it the waste services coordinator, I see ads where it's sponsored that they're doing stuff with the landfill to promote more stuff, and they're doing articles that way. And I see it on social media, and I see it on the website of the AV News. That maybe we expand on that tactic of sponsoring an article, because I think do people read more articles, then they're going to look for a little ad in on the sheet of the paper. And then a thought, and I don't know how feasible this might be for public hearings, if people don't necessarily have access to a computer for the public hearing and can't attend, do we have the opportunity to maybe utilize some of the community halls spaced appropriately to kind of have like a group of people there that could maybe that group could zoom in, like if we organized it with questions that they could participate, like, and kind of decentralize almost, so we utilize different buildings. I don't know if that would work or not, but just a thought that I had.
I'm certainly, yeah, I think in principle that's a great idea. Now public meetings are very different than public hearings. So public hearings have some, there's a significant amount of legislation and just reams and reams of case law that sets sort of what we do and don't do, right? And so then we have recently updated our procedures bylaw and put in some very strict parameters for when information is received and how. So if a group of people, not necessarily staff or directors, sort of set up, yes, at the community hall, people could come in and participate via that Zoom link. Absolutely. Like that's like there's no restriction on one person per computer or anything like that. That's I think it's more, we would want to make sure the mechanics of it, and the mechanics being more how we set it up and our involvement doesn't conflict with any of the rules around public hearings. But if it's done sort of outside of the regional district, absolutely, I think that's a great idea. If somebody did that in the public.
Is there a way that we could encourage community halls to offer that? Or is that kind of overstepping where some of that is? And just to try and get more people.
No, absolutely.
The opportunity,
great
right?
ideas. I would want to report back. And the idea with this is that we would put together sort of an engagement strategy and how people could participate in a large, hopefully large, amount of participation, but a very significant public hearing, right? So often what we've done with public hearings so far have been very localized. So this is something that applies to everybody, and how would we approach that? So, because we've had some thoughts and discussions, like we can't have, a public hearing has to be at one place. Like it's very awkward, at the best of times on how we do public hearings when things get contentious, and so the engagement is something, and public input and public meetings ahead of a public hearing are all very helpful, useful things. But then we need to make sure that feedback gets incorporated, gets to the board, for the public hearing. So that's why we're doing, like I mentioned, a lot of this work now before we have first reading. Like that becomes key. But I think that's a great idea for the community. So if people, Beaver Creek Community Hall, Bamfield Community Hall, somebody organized something at in Hewlett at the rec center or someplace for people to come in and ask those questions. I mean, that's something we certainly could, I think, need to take a good look at. I mean, in principle, it sounds like a great idea. That isn't something that sort of had popped into our mind. We're more like, how do we get people involved? And we've been very cognizant that not everybody has access to all of the technology, and not everybody in the regional district has access to the high-speed internet. Yeah, no, or cell phone service. No, I do. I do. I think that's really important. A few years ago, before the West Coast had high-speed internet, we had just a community meeting, and that was the topic of discussion was high-speed internet and access to what most of BC has, and people talked about they would hotspot their cell phones to go on and use the internet. Well, I mean, that becomes incredibly expensive, and that's if you have cell phone service. So. Yeah. Okay. So certainly, this is a great discussion. So
I know my own history with public hearings. It has been really beneficial to have the applicant actually do a public meeting before the public hearing, so that the information is out there, the questions are asked, so that come the time for the public hearing, most answers have been given. Director Roberts.
Through the chair to Mr. Erg. And I just want to say I appreciate all the work that staff has done, as Director Beckett mentioned. One of the things that I would be interested in seeing is that after you receive the final responses from all the other parties involved after September 25th, if it would be possible to, as Director McNabb mentioned, he's received most of his input or requests from via people reading the newspaper. If we could somehow put out a project summary handout to the various newspapers, including the Westerly on the West Coast, and also the Alberni Valley News. Just food for thought.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea too.
All right, thank you very much for that.
And I'm sure Amy's taking lots of notes on this.
I have a question on it and another option here. So it says zoning bylaw and official community plan OCP updates. So is this an update to the OCP or an amendment?
Well, I guess it's an amendment. So we're doing some mostly minor updates to the community plan. And then we have incorporated the development permits around Sproul Lake to include docks in the upland. We'd like to expand it to the request of the community. But most of the updates are I would say of a minor nature, because we need to do that to write the zoning bylaw the way it is, right? Because you cannot zone something contrary to the official community plan. So say where something is going to be zoned residential, but it might currently be commercial in the OCP, we need to make those changes as well. And then we're taking the opportunity to allow temporary, or to change the time frame on temporary use permits in Long Beach to 3 years to reflect the legislation. Make sure that accessory dwelling units jive throughout the regional district. They're all the same. But those are minor. But we need to make those changes so that the zoning bylaw is valid.
Great. Is there any more questions? So from this conversation, I guess we'll be expecting something from staff as far as recommendations on how to move forward with the public consultation for our zoning updates, or before our public hearing happens.
Yeah, so the plan would be, once and we're starting to get feedback on the referrals, is we will summarize all of that. We'll have a legal review. So, any changes that come out of all of that, we will do that, and then summarize sort of the consultation, sort of what we've understood from the discussion today on what we'll do, and present that to the board. And as always, we'll keep everything up to date on the website and make sure the public's aware of that. And then we can have that discussion to make sure we've encompassed everything that they've thought about. We do, and we'll continue to look at what other areas are doing, especially now in sort of the times we're in now. And it's something we regularly do and discuss with planning colleagues throughout the province. And then report back to the board. But but again, each community is different, right? So and has challenges that some areas don't have, around technology access and things like that. Our goal is to be absolutely inclusive and to get the feedback. This is community planning, so it's not planning staff doing it. We're doing this because it's community planning for the community. So that's the purpose.
Thank you, Director McNabb.
Yeah, I really think an article in the paper versus the public legal notification versus the statement of intent with regards to bylaw changes is usually a lot of legal language that some people wouldn't understand, a lot of people wouldn't understand. And an actual article explaining in plain English the intent and the effect of what we're doing, I think is a lot better approach. With a headline like zoning bylaw update severely changes what you and your neighbor can do with your property. Something like that will get their attention, I'm sure.
Yeah, I could add to that, but I'm not gonna. Director Shannon and Director Bodner.
Thank you. just to kind of build on this public engagement prior to, because I know we have a public engagement plan for the burning bylaw. This is a little off topic, but as we're talking about ideas for possibly upping our public engagement for the zoning bylaw, is there time, because we haven't started that yet with the burning bylaw, to maybe implement some of those things with that as well, to try and be more proactive? Because I feel like that's going to be a big one for the valley too.
So we have
Okay.
done that, and we'll be bringing back a summary on the burning bylaw in October. So we've done some ads in the paper. We did mail outs. I can't remember everything I did. Alex, if you're there, if you want to give a quick summary of where we're at with that, that would be really helpful.
Sure, I am here. So we have started it. We've like Mike said, put some ads in the paper, ran some ads in Valley Vibe magazine, and put some notices out there. The one big aspect that we haven't done yet is an online survey, which we're hoping to launch in the coming weeks here. And I know that Director Shannon and myself have had some discussions of whether we can incorporate like an online engagement survey as a part of the zoning bylaw as well. So that could be something we look at. But the next steps on the burning bylaw are certainly that online survey, and then we'll report back to the board. Happy to answer any questions about that stuff as well. Thank you.
Thanks.
Sure.
Thanks. I'm just going to follow up. Because I haven't seen any of the ads, and I appreciate the update, but then maybe this is an opportunity where even with the burning bylaw, maybe we can try and implement an article into the paper to get people's attention with it before the online survey comes out, to kind of be proactive again in that way. I don't know if it's too late for that, but something to think about maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that and we will certainly look at that. My only comment about the burning bylaw versus the community planning aspects, which are the OCPs and the zoning bylaw, is that, and while the zoning bylaw is regulatory, I would view it in a very different way than I would review the burning bylaw. So there's the purpose and the rationale that the board's going through the process of adopting the burning and the wood stove bylaws is because it's been identified that there's a specific health risk related to burning. It doesn't prohibit burning; it regulates when and where people can. And then again, with wood stoves, it's the requirement to bring wood stoves up to a standard that significantly reduces the health impacts, and that's the idea and purpose behind that. And a burning bylaw, the way to change a burning bylaw is much easier than changing a zoning bylaw. So this is, we work through the public engagement. I don't expect that everybody in the community will be happy with the burning bylaw, but there's people right now, and we get regular feedback where people are unhappy with some of the burning that goes on in the regional district and the impacts it has on the community, sort of both in health perspective and outside. And so that's been the purpose and the rationale behind that. So we'll bring the information forward as well. But I think there's some, in my view and my understanding of where the board's at, and my understanding was, and we're working the idea that there's some urgency to get the burning bylaw to the board and an opportunity to adopt it or not adopt it, based on some public feedback. So I don't know if that's helpful. We're always happy to take direction, and if we're not understanding sort of that process, we can certainly make adjustments.
Do you want to continue?
I think it was more a comment of because I appreciate and I know where that's going, but just maybe to try and just on our communications and kind of be more proactive on that end. Yeah. Thank you.
And what we bring back, once we've finalized, the engagement sort of as we understood, we'll bring back a summary and explain that and that for the board to review and do that.
Thank you, Director Bodner.
Thank you. I think another thing that might be helpful as far as advertising goes is putting a session on Shaw Cable so that you perhaps have somebody like Mike or Alex be there to answer questions, and a couple of directors so that they can explain the processes that goes that go on, and the difference between a public hearing and a public meeting, and perhaps answer questions that people would want to know. And also, when advertising in the paper, I've noticed the things that really catch your eye are the things that are colored, and the black and white, oh yeah, and just another hearing kind of thing. But if there's something there to catch their eye, to say this is important, but and the radio, getting in touch with the radio. I know people listen to the radio, the older people do, and like me, and local radio, and Shaw, because if there's some explanations, really break things down so that people can understand what this process is all about, would be helpful, I think. Thank you.
Okay, I think you've got a lot of direction.
No, that's great. That's, yeah.
Madam Chair, it looks like Amy and Atka would like to speak.
Sure. Okay, Amy, would you like to join in?
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I just wanted to take a minute to say thank you so much to all the directors for all of the feedback and this discussion, because it's so important and so wonderful that you guys are providing some suggestions, because of course, like you mentioned, local government staff are trying to wrap their head around how we can best engage with the community during COVID. And I think that I definitely agree with all of your suggestions, and I agree with Director McNabb there about really focusing on an article in the paper. And I'll just use the age-friendly plan as an example. I think that was such a great example, because we ended up doing a bunch of engagement during COVID. And I think the news ended up publishing 2 articles, as well as I put a lot of colorful ads in the papers as well. And so we ended up, having great feedback through lots of different, different methods of engagement. But anyways, the point is that we just need to put a bug in their ear. And so what we did is they did a article early on, and one of the reporters came to that community meeting that we had. Unfortunately, we can't have a large community event like that right now, but we can definitely think of different ways. And then what I did is I followed up with another email to that same reporter before I presented to the board, and then they did a follow-up email. So I think we just need to think of things like that, where we just really poke different people and hope that they could help bring attention. And then Director Shannon, I'm happy to hear that you are going to be bringing up the need for communications, because of course I'm definitely a big advocate of that, and I try and do a good job at that on the side of my desk while I'm working on the project as well. So it'd be wonderful to have some sort of support, more support with communications. An example is when we were working the age-friendly plan, I was able to get the city to really help advertise our survey, and they did that on their Facebook page. And so we had, almost 400 survey results, and I think it was largely due to that Facebook advertising. So yes, I just want to wrap it up by saying thank you for all the ideas. And you're right, Mike, I took a whole bunch of notes, and we'll follow up with everything there. And then lastly, I wanted to point out that we still need to consult with the advisory planning commissions. And that was listed in our report that was just presented to the board for the zoning bylaw review. So any ideas that you guys might have on that as well, because that definitely is a priority and needs to happen in the next little while here. So I'll just leave that with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any more questions, comments? No, I don't think there's any motions that need to come out of this, so continue. Thank you, Mr.
So the next topic is the housing needs report. So as I'm sure everybody's aware, we received a good chunk of funding to do this work from the provincial funding. And I just want to note that it's also a requirement of the Local Government Act. So even if we didn't get the funding, we still have to do it. So that I think that's been really helpful. So and just a quick summary of how we're the plan for it is we're starting with Banfield, and then going to the Alberni Valley, and then finally Long Beach. And sort of the rationale for that is this was initiated with some significant interest and desire in Banfield to get this going. So I think they're a bit farther along. And then Long Beach, we're doing as the last leg of this project, because Tofino, yeah, I know, it's a good reason. Tofino and Ukilet are also going to be looking at updating their age-friendly plans, age-friendly housing needs report, and wanting to and want to coordinate Long Beach, Tofino, and Ukilet together, and possibly use do the work together. So they had asked if we could sort of work, and they're just in the process of applying for the funding. So that's the rationale for that. So, and also Amy Anaka and Sarah Holden have reached out to VIU with their Master's of Community Planning program, and they also do consulting work through the Biosphere, utilizing staff and students to look at options to support that. So we have certainly had lots of success working with VIU in the past, and just in the process of getting that set up, sort of looking at what work they can do. And then Amy and Aka would again be leading this project, just like she is leading the zoning bylaw project. I really would just, I'm not sure if Amy has anything she wants to add to this. She can jump in, or we can answer questions. And Bob has a question.
Thank you very much. If I can go ahead. I'm wondering, Mike or Amy or someone, can you tell me what the next steps are for Banfield? Because you're absolutely right. Both the Wyatt and the Banfield Marine Sciences Center are anxious to see what we can do from a ground ready standpoint with some projects there. So just very, very quickly, 30 seconds. What does it look like for our community moving forward?
I can go ahead, Mike, if you want. So a priority was obviously to get the zoning bylaw project out for referral, and everything always seems to take a little bit longer, especially during COVID times. This week, actually, we're meeting with VIU again on Thursday, and Sarah and I are just this afternoon going through and figuring out the agreement with them. And it sounds like they're going to be able to help us get a survey specifically for Banfield going as soon as possible. So that's definitely our first step. I have to follow up again with the Banfield Community Affairs Society, right? Because there's a meeting soon, the 25th, I think. And so I want to make sure that we connect. I have connected with them. I just need to follow up and figure out, maybe I need to join that meeting for a few minutes to talk with them or whatnot. But I definitely would appreciate any suggestions for how to best engage with Banfield, in that it's remote. We aren't going to be taking trips there unless that's needed or desired, and how we're going to do engagement, during COVID. So I really appreciated our previous conversation about how we engaged with the zoning bylaw review. So I think we also need to expand on that and think about that with all the projects we're working on. And on that note, when we talked to VIU last week, I already put it out there that we would really appreciate any innovative ideas those students and staff at VIU can think of to help us engage with the housing needs report. So to sum that up, I just need to get the agreement done with VIU this week, and then hopefully early next week or whatnot, I will still be the point person, and I'll be reaching out to yourself, of course, and anyone else that we talked about before to figure out what are the next best steps, just for even if they want to help with developing the survey, or how we're going to get the word out for the survey, what that looks like, and that sort of thing. So I see a survey as an initial next step, and then maybe some ideas around, should we have a virtual meeting? I don't know. So we'd be definitely looking for your help and the community's help on how to best do this, for sure.
Well, yeah, that's great. Thanks very much. The next community affairs meeting is the 21st, but I think that may be a little bit too soon. I think I can speak to at least give a report on the 21st, and then I can touch base with you and we can plan something out. But I'm hopefully that's helpful for the rest of the directors to hear, your process. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. I will add to that for the rest of the directors. So the Alberni Valley is sort of next on the list, but it's definitely not being forgotten or being put to the side. While the Banfield one is being worked on, I'm also going to be starting or working on, or have already started working now on the Alberni Valley one. And so as I've written in the past reports, the city did apply for their own funding the year prior, but it turns out that they are basically just getting started at the same time as us. So I'm working really hard. I've been having conversations with city staff and their consultant to see how we can best collaborate. And I'm just waiting for final word, but hoping that we could do, as an initial step, a joint Alberni Valley survey. And I just being very cautious that we don't overwhelm residents in the city and electoral areas in the Alberni Valley with too much engagement at once. So I'm trying hard to collaborate on anything possible, stakeholder interviews and that sort of thing. So that's definitely, the Alberni Valley one is going to be well underway soon as well. So I don't know if there's any questions about that or anything.
I'd like to suggest that the Vital Signs and the Health Network have done a lot of gathering of information, so they might be able to assist in some way.
Oh, thank you for that, Penny. On that note, I forgot to mention, I've reached out to Marcy from the Health Network early on, and we've actually been collaborating because, as I'm sure you all are aware, Marcy is undertaking a poverty reduction strategy at the exact same time. So I'm just being cognizant that all this potential engagement and our plans are happening at the same time. They're all very much related. Housing is very much related to poverty, obviously. And so Marcy actually sent me the survey, and I was able to help provide some feedback in it and put some housing questions in there and whatnot. So to sum that up, I'm trying to work very closely with everyone and collaborate with everyone that's working on similar projects at the same time. So yes, it's all very much related.
Thank you. Any questions? Director McNabb?
So the survey itself, I don't know if we have an opportunity to have a look at the survey prior to it going out. One of the questions that I don't know if we can even ask, but it would sure be nice to know is where the homeless folks are actually migrating from. One article in Czech, I think, had it, that they had talked to some folks that were living in a tent in Victoria, and they had used their CERB money to drive from Nova Scotia to Victoria because they heard that there was free housing. And the reason I would want to know that is because I think it changes the responsibility of funding from provincial, regional to federal. And so as I say, I'm not sure if it's even a question we can ask, but sure would be nice to know. Thanks.
I do have a response to that, Director McNabb. Thanks so much for bringing that up. So as part of the review of Marcy's housing or poverty reduction survey, I had actually requested that she add that exact question. Where are, I think it was prior, or if you've recently moved to Alberni Valley or the city, where did you move from? And then those questions will all connect back to if they're living in poverty or whatnot. So as far as I know, that exact question has been added to the poverty reduction survey that will be going out shortly. And I can also add that sort of language into our housing survey as well. So it's definitely being included.
Okay, Director Bodnar?
Yes, I don't know whether this this is worth mentioning, I think. Last night I saw on the news where Seattle is started a program where people have the extra land that's empty, that's nothing, it's not being used for, and they're putting up mini homes in the back for the to house those people who are living in tents. And Victoria is on the bandwagon and it's doing it as well. So I don't know whether that's something that's going to be big or something that could be looked at. I just saw it on the news and the mayor was talking about it from Victoria yesterday.
So I certainly think that's part of the options that look at and sort of, what are the needs and then how do we address those needs? And that's certainly, various types of housing options and how they would fit within your community are all of the things we look at. So absolutely, that would fall into the housing needs report and sort of as a potential option or solution. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Is there anything more on this? Not, we'll carry on.
So I just have a summary of the short-term vacation rentals. So as everybody's aware, sort of after COVID, so when the state of emergency was declared, we, at staff, we just paused processing some applications. We have since started them and included a requirement in the temporary use permit, or recommended a requirement that the boards adopted in the ones they've issued since the state of emergency, that provincial health orders are followed. So there's provincial health orders around vacation rentals, hotels, things like that, that would apply. So to date, the board has issued 12 temporary use permits. We have 11 additional applications. And some of those are on hold for various reasons. We're waiting for additional information from the property owner. So, some examples of some of those things relate to upgrades to septic to make sure it meets the standard for the rental that they're doing. Health and safety upgrades to the building or structure itself are also part of that. I think I've mentioned this every time we've talked about vacation rentals. When we went into this, the complaints were coming from very specific areas, and we've learned, that it's not just waterfront properties and the waterfront properties in Banfield that these are applying to, and there is some of them that want to make sure that the building code requirements and occupancy requirements for people to live there or sleep in a room are met. So those are some of the things we're working through with people. So some of those are on hold. I think it's been a very helpful and useful process. We have been following and monitoring where we've issued temporary use permits, and then actively contacting people, and recently contacted those that we know are operating that have not applied, and just let them know about the bylaw enforcement, our bylaw notice enforcement, and the ticketing options that we're going to have. And I'll talk a little bit about that probably next. I think I've covered off everything I wanted to on that, and happy to answer any questions anybody has.
So I've got two questions. One of them is around the short-term rental situation. Is there any sense of how much of the tip of the iceberg we've actually captured with the numbers that we've got?
So we have identified about 60, just with us surfing the web, getting complaints. And so we have received 23 applications. And I'd say that 60 is fluid. Some people are saying that they are not operating anymore. And again, we're following up on that. I expect it's higher than 60, but that's what we've been able to identify, and kind of want to keep it in a context that we can manage it and deal with the ones that are the most problematic. And then the idea is to keep working through these and get them all legalized. So going into this, I don't think nobody expected in my discussions with other areas that have taken a same approach. The feedback I got was kind of expect about 50% compliance. The ticketing is going to be helpful, and I know our bylaw enforcement officer has been having those conversations. So to either have people come in and apply and legalize, or to adjust what they're doing so that it complies with their zoning bylaw. So that answers the question.
Okay, well, two questions. The other question is around temporary use permits. So I know of 2 temporary use permits that we've issued since being on the board that certainly should be up for review. And I'm wondering how proactive we are with that implementing that review on the timelines that the TUPs were set and reevaluating whether or not the TUP should be renewed versus having the person come to us asking for it to be renewed.
So we will or have, when a TUP expires, we'll contact the property owner and let them know that they will need to renew. And then they have the option to renew or stop doing it. Otherwise, it becomes an enforcement issue. I would suggest if there's any specific questions, we could go in camera and talk about specific details of if a TUP is expired, if directors have any questions.
Well,
Or I
guess my concern is the board issues these temporary use permits and it should come back to the board for review. And it doesn't seem to be happening that way. So we don't know if the temporary use has fallen off, that they're not using it for that anymore. We don't know if it's escalated and changed into something else that should be rezoned. These, to my knowledge, maybe we did one that was a renewal of a temporary use permit in the time that I've been here, but it just seems like we're reactive on this instead of proactive, and I'd like to be proactive.
So we do proactively follow up where one's expired. We have, top of my head, I can think of one where we did, like out at the Sing Sing one, we did renew that temporary use permit. They've subsequently rezoned. I think there's another one we've renewed, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. And there's a couple that are outstanding that we've contacted the property owner, and we'll be reporting back to the board depending on what action is needed.
Thank you. Yes, I was reading in there that about that the property owners are responsible for limiting the number of guests that live in the house. So how is this monitored, and how much of a problem it is? Because the owner of the house may not be living in the same city or the same town. So, and if there is a problem where more people are going to be there, how is that handled?
So we haven't had any either complaints or observed where people have exceeded that. If the property owner is not living on the property or nearby, they're required to have a caretaker. So that's part of the process. Somebody has to be within 20 minutes of the vacation rental. A caretaker has to be able to respond, and their phone number has to be posted, and the permit has to be posted on site, visible from the road, basically, so that if a neighbor comes and sees something going on, on a Saturday night, there's a contact person to call.
Okay.
And we do follow up and like go around where we've issued temporary use permits, make sure that the requirement, the permit itself has been posted in a visible area with a phone number, and if it's not, we let them know that they need to do that.
Okay.
And then the other thing that within the temporary use permits, there is a clause that if you do not comply with the conditions, the board has the option to revoke the permit. So if that situation were to happen, so say hypothetically a vacation rental permit was issued for a vacation rental for 5 people, and then we got evidence that 10 people were staying there, we would report back to the board, and then with the options, which may include revoking the permit.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Director Roberts.
Through the chair to Mr. Erg. This, I think, crosses sort of boundaries, and I'm talking about the housing needs issue and short-term vacation rentals. I see a lot of small homes being built on tandem axles trailers. Now, if somebody were to pull one of those onto their property, is there any means that we can enforce a bylaw, or we're talking about potentially a sanitary situation, that sort of thing. If they pulled one of these onto their property and hooked into their septic system, would it not be similar to having an ADU, an additional dwelling unit, on the property or whatever?
Absolutely. Yes, it would. And really, it's going to depend on what it is they build and put on the wheels. And I think I know what you're referring to. Yes, I mean, we've heard and people saying, well, I'm building a tiny home. So to locate it as a dwelling unit or an accessory dwelling unit, it would need to meet building code for a dwelling. So depending on how it's constructed. So sometimes these are constructed to be like a small mobile home, which could potentially, the wheels could come off and it could be considered a dwelling. Often they are not, and they're considered an RV. And so then that could be, we can regulate that through like we would any RV being pulled onto a property. And then if it is anything that's connected into the sewage as part of the permit process, they would have to confirm that, that the septic field's capable of handling the additional load to be put on. And often, people may be referring, there's probably a park model RV is probably more in line with what people are building. But it's gonna be how it's constructed and does it meet a building code requirement.
Yeah, thanks for that. I've seen some that are built like little homes.
Mm-hmm.
They have fireplaces in them, wood burning fireplaces. I mean, the sky's the limit. And so if it's a license for a mobile, like a trailer, and they pull it onto somebody's property, and I've seen a couple of properties that have two of them on there. It to me that is really, really reaching out there to satisfy the housing needs or their short-term rentals, or they're looking for additional income for their properties, whatever it happens to be. But thank you for that.
Yeah, no, and where we're aware of those, we'd be looking at them from through the enforcement lens, and does what they're doing comply with the zone, is it construction or however, is it a homemade job? Was it constructed? Does it have the required stamp? So there's classifications for mobile homes and classifications for RVs. So we confirm, does it meet those standards? Our building inspectors will regularly look at those. We regularly get complaints about RVs on properties, which we look at and try and deal with. So, but yeah, and we're seeing more and more of those inquiries and complaints about things like that.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I July 27th, I missed the provincial order for restricting the number of vacation rental guests. So was that widely advertised, and was it a message sent to the legal temporary use permit, short-term vacation rental permit owners? Was that message put out there?
We didn't necessarily send it out to the ones where we had issued them previously. It was in newspapers and ads. It is, I think the limit is 5 people right now.
Okay.
We have put it into recent temporary use permits that we issued. So, those people are aware. What they had proposed for both, they complied, was well under the limit. And then it is their responsibility. So what we're doing is just making, like, we've put a clause in the new one saying that they have to comply with provincial orders. And we weren't specific about what that order was that day, because these orders may change. It may increase, it may decrease, they may say no again. So we just wanted to have that ability through our, basically it's a temporary zoning permit is what it is. The ability to regulate any health order, any health order requirements. Just really looking out for the public interest and public health through what we can regulate. But it's still, as with all of these, it's the responsibility of the property owner to make sure that they're complying with either zoning regulations or in this case temporary use permits. And I mean, where we can, we try to be proactive, but we where it's prudent, we'll send out we do mail outs and things like that regularly, sort of in consultation with the board. But in all of these cases, it's still the responsibility of the property owner to find out if what they're proposing or what they're doing is legal.
Right.
And we spend a lot of time as staff talking and answering those kinds of questions. and always let people know how much we appreciate when they phone ahead of time to find out, as opposed to, a month later, we're trying to, fix it. So, so we do spend a lot of time talking to people in general about what they can and can't do in certain zones.
So this would be something that we would be enforcing through our bylaws, or?
So if, where we have included in temporary use permits, we couldn't do that until we knew, right? So if we include that they have to comply with the public health order and they don't, they would be in breach of not just the health order, but the temporary use permit. So a permit that we issued in August, a temporary use permit that we issued in August will have that. So we wouldn't necessarily we would inform public health, if it was appropriate. One that was, say, issued a year ago that doesn't have that clause, we would have to go to public health to inform them of what happened.
Okay.
So they can, because we can't enforce the public health order, we can enforce our bylaws. So the way we're drafting them now is we can, if they it makes sense, if they contravene the public health order, they're in contravention of the permit and we can enforce it. And if those situations come up, we'll report back.
Okay. So just wondered if we have it posted anywhere on our website, this new order.
No, it's posted on, I don't know if it's on the emergency planning portion of our website.
Okay, Director McNabb and Director Roberts.
Just to say that the notification from provincial health authority said that it was enforceable by police departments and by bylaw enforcement officers. So we would be able to enforce it if there were an infraction.
Okay, great. My question was around that if we don't have it posted anywhere, then people will say, well, how did I know? But I'd just like to see something in writing.
It's on the permit.
Okay. Director Roberts?
Through the chair to Mr. Erg. The last paragraph, and we discussed this briefly, you said that there, for any TUP or that they would be allowed 5 guests. So that would be in addition to the number of people that can actually reside in the house, based on square footage.
So we will set the limits, but no, it's just a blanket requirement, the 5. That's the public health order.
Plus 5.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that.
There any more? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Mr. Carry on.
Okay, now I'm just going to talk a little update about the bylaw notice enforcement and the bylaws, so our ticketing bylaw. So we are just finalizing the agreement with the city of Nanaimo. They would be doing, that was part of the bylaw, so Nanaimo would be the dispute, the adjudication mechanism. So there's a dispute, basically bylaw court that Nanaimo convenes when there's enough cases and there is a large number of local governments, municipalities, and regional districts within the vicinity that utilize that service. And there's a fee, we would pay that fee, and then part of the application fee if somebody's disputing, that also goes to the bylaw court. So we're just, like I said, we're just getting the paperwork signed off. Our bylaw enforcement officer has certainly been in communication with lots of people, letting them know that this is coming, and we have seen what I would call an uptick in compliance in some of our open cases. Now, certainly not all of them, but that message seems to get out there, and then we'll be providing regular updates as far as where we're at, and I'll let everybody know once that final the adjudication paperwork signed off with Nanaimo, and we'll be in a position where we can issue tickets. And again, the goal has been not to issue a bunch of tickets. The goal is to get compliance, but I expect we will be issuing a few tickets.
So just wondering about Nanaimo, why the delay? Is there a big process there that they have to go through? Or?
Yeah, it's just don't have all of the answers. It's like everyone with COVID, people are not all working in the office at the same time, and it's been summer holidays as well. So I expect this will be done ASAP.
Okay.
But
I
I will let you know. It's just as when I was writing the report, that's where it's at. I'm expecting an answer this week.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Doesn't need a phone call. Has it fallen off your desk?
Yeah.
Did the dog eat my homework? Okay, great. Director Bodnar?
Yes, could you refresh my memory, please, is why this is going to Nanaimo and not being handled locally?
It's just the cost of holding bylaw court. It is, there's a lot of cost because you bring in an adjudicator from the outside, and we wouldn't have enough cases. So it's within our area, Tofino and I think Hewlett and the city of Port Alberni, all utilize this as well as the regional district of Nanaimo. So it's efficiencies and cost savings.
Okay, thank you.
So the adjudicator comes to Port Alberni, or is it a Zoom?
No,
or
it
is
would,
it?
well, I guess it would be Zoom now, but typically it would be held in Nanaimo.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else? Director Beckett, anything from you?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Carry on. We've got a
Okay.
big agenda here.
Yeah, almost there. So the second to last one is just an update on bylaw enforcement, more in general. So I just wanted to highlight that there are currently 20 new bylaw enforcement files for 2020. There's still some of those cases that are from previous years that are also, not resolved yet, and working towards that. Just note that seven bylaw enforcement files have recently been closed. And then I just wanted to highlight that staff have been working in conjunction with the province since May regarding a dock that was placed in front of a park in Sprout Lake. So it's our park. It was in the Crown portion. So all the lands involved are public, so we can put this out there. And also and so we're looking at having it removed fairly soon. So it should be dealt with within the week. And also it's an example and a highlight of our bylaw enforcement officer has worked really closely with the with both Department of Fisheries and Oceans staff and the provincial compliance staff to resolve a lot of issues where there's overlap with our jurisdiction, or in some cases, it certainly affects and impacts the residents of the regional district, but it may be a provincial dumping of garbage and things like that. So working closely, there's been a lot of cases or files where Jason has worked closely with the compliance officers of the province and the federal government to get things going. He's got a really good relationship, and it's been really beneficial for all of the agencies involved and the public. So I think this is just an example that I could bring up in the meeting and highlight to you. So I'm again happy to answer any questions.
Director Bodnar?
Oh, sorry.
Anyone else? Oh, sorry. I know that there's been a lot of complaints that I've heard out at Sprout Lake during the COVID. A lot of people that are coming to Sprout Lake, and it seems that everybody has a lot of time on their hands and like to complain these days. So I've been passing them on to Jason, and he's been quite diligent about checking everything out. So
yeah, we certainly try to follow up, and
yeah,
we've had some. The other thing is people doing work. So we're there's been some works that have been happening within the development permit areas. We've been following up on those as well.
Great, thank you. No questions? Great, thanks for the report.
All right. And then the last one is the SOMAS flood mapping project was on the list of things to bring to the EA Directors Committee. So I just wanted to highlight or note that this was as a regional planning project, so it's an all directors. There's certainly out of this are some components of this that very specifically address the EA planning function around flood setbacks and things like that. So I'm happy to provide the update. So provincial staff currently are just reviewing the report and the flood maps the way they're drafted. The next steps would be to bring in the Petchesith, CSHOT, and City of Port Alberni staff to give them an update so that we can all update the board and respective councils together, because this will impact each of the areas. To be honest, haven't had as much time as I've wanted to work on this project. So I want to have a good thorough read, make sure that I'm understanding sort of all of the implications of it, how it affects the zoning bylaw setbacks, and provide a report back to the board. I certainly had hoped to have this back to the board, earlier than it is, but things have been what they've been. And then, giving the options for a report. for the board to adopt, and then look at what the next steps are. Because really, we need to look at what the implications for that are. So one of the big things is the flood setbacks. Now they haven't sort of what I've looked at preliminarily haven't significantly changed from what we knew flood setbacks were sort of up the Somas River, but we now have the flood setbacks that will go up into Sprout Lake, and I'm going to work with Amy Wilson, and she's going to we'll provide some good maps to sort of show where those setbacks were. I expect it will, if the board adopts the new flood mapping maps, that there will be some changes to setback. Sorry, there's vertical setbacks and horizontal setbacks within our zoning bylaw when there's flood zones involved. So that may sort of up the height at which people can build, because we've observed over the years in high water where the water comes up to or almost reaches where that setback currently is, which is 10 feet above the natural boundary. So it will be above, basically it's 2 feet or 0.8 meters above the 200-year flood level. And I know that the levels we've had at Sprout Lake have not been close to 200-year flood levels. So, but again, we'll bring that back and report that information to the board and look at that. And then there's also the mitigation components, sort of what would be the next steps and what other funding opportunities, which I haven't sort of gotten that information together yet. So we need to do a bit of work on that once we hear back from the province, and we'll be reporting back as soon as possible to the board. And again, happy to answer any questions anybody has right now about this.
Okay, I'm sure that this will affect our zoning bylaw that we're just putting into place right now.
It will, but the way the zoning bylaw is drafted, it won't need to. The zoning bylaw itself won't need to be changed because it's drafted, and it currently is this as well. It says you have to be 10 feet above the natural boundary and on your horizontal setback, or 2 feet above the 200-year flood level. So this is just about reestablishing or finding out what the current 200-year flood level is. So that's where we bring the flood maps and sort of confirm that the board adopts the flood mapping component of it, as opposed to having to change the zoning bylaw.
Okay, Director McNabb.
So my question is around accounting for this service, the regional planning service. Just kind of wondering where we are on percentage of budget for the year, if you got any idea of that.
Sorry, no, I don't. I can.
Maybe it's something
Like specific to this project, or just in
no specific to the service itself.
Okay, I don't have that. I'd have to check with Terry.
I'd like to see it if we could get it.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Sort of connected to this project would be Bob's Rock,
Mm-hmm.
And the sweep.
Okay.
I thought there was going to be a recommendation for like 2 projects or something that came out of this.
Yeah, and that's the information. Part of the report back to the board would be the mitigation options.
Okay.
Coming back from that.
Okay. I'm already getting calls from residents concerned about this year's flooding coming.
Yeah.
So they're wondering what's happening. I have had really good contact with Catalyst, saying that they would be taking the weir plates out in the fall and putting them back in the spring. And they did put them back in the spring after taking them out last fall. And I'll be wondering if I think it's October when they take the plates out again. And I'm just wondering if there's some kind of a way that we can work with them to, when they take the plates out, to put the sweep back in.
Right. So I think the sweeps, the weir plates certainly play into the work done, the flood mapping, and the sweep. I've understood they've agreed to put the sweep back in, but I don't have any further details.
Right. There needs to be some work done with Mosaic or the province on access to be able to get in there. And also probably a little bit of a funding to assist with the annual maintenance. That's just yet to be determined. So really would like to see that happen. We're lucky that nothing really that I know of happened of anybody going down the Sprout River this year with the amount of people that were coming to the Sprout Lake Park. It was amazing to see all those people there again. Good in many aspects. So is there any other questions? None? Great. Thank you so much. There's a lot of information to take in here. So now, I guess we go, is there any late business? No. Question period. So I go to Wendy, I guess, to ask if there was.
Yes, yeah, Madam Chair, yes. So there's no public in attendance today on Zoom webinar, so no questions there. And there were no questions or comments received at our email address that's been set up, responses@acrd.bc.ca.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so that's it.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor? Carried. Thank you so much for our. Oh, yes, we did. Come back into the meeting then.
Motion to receive the report.
Thank you.
A second, Director Shannon.
Thank you. Got that, Wendy?
Yes, I
Great.
did. Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Okay, now motion to adjourn.
Did we
Oh.
say all in favor?
All in favor? I thought I did. Carried.
Looking forward to seeing all of you on Thursday.
Awesome.
Is that cookies I